everyone, and welcome one more time to Story Stalking, a division of Dead to Rights, the podcast video for the crime genre industry. I'm your host, Donna Carrick, and today I'm going to be bringing you a story of my own creation titled Solace in D minor, which first appeared in the Key of 13, the anthology of murder and music by the Mesdames of Mayhem, Carrick Publishing, 2019. So I hope that you'll enjoy this story by yours truly. And before we get to it, I want to remind you once again that we've got a brand new anthology coming out in October by Carrick Publishing Crime, and it's titled A Grave Diagnosis, 35 Stories of Murder and Malaise. So watch for that to come out at the end of October. You'll be hearing about it online and every place, and there's going to be a virtual launch this year on October 31st, and you'll be welcome to join us on Zoom. We'll send out the Zoom details closer to the date, and you'll get to meet many of the authors, as many as we can get to join the Zoom launch. There's 35 authors, so I'm not sure who all will join, but we'll certainly let you know. And with that, I bring you my short story, Solace in D minor, from In the Key of 13, Carrick Publishing, 2019, The Mesdames of Mayhem. Memory, that never completed first draft of life, ever changing, evolving, with each telling and retelling. Still, I do remember him. He is forever blended in the mixer of my mind, images that swirl within the music, always moving to the rhythm, the melody of sorrow. As a child, I was fully aware of how special our father was. He was a superstar, the proverbial whole package, loved by millions, and he was my hero. Dad was a real father, one who spent time with us, as precious as that time was. He blessed us with genuine love and a unique outlook on life. I remember the day he gave us the talk, the one about our family's wealth and privilege. Money, he said, is a fortress. It protects us from the outside world. It shields us from the consequences of our actions. But never forget, girls, it's also a prison. Wealth, especially old money, can hold you in a comfortable concrete bubble. Do your best to avoid that trap. Experience the outside world. Keep an open heart. Get to know people from all walks of life. And above all, never be afraid of love. I was 8 years old when he passed away. That's what our mother called it, passing away. He hanged himself in the sound room one fine morning, leaving our mother to finish raising my sisters, Tara, Clara, and me, within the walls of this ornate prison we called home. Our father was born into money. All key aspects of his life were mapped out for him from a young age. He knew what kind of woman he was expected to marry, and he didn't disappoint. Our mother was raised on old money, not as old as Dad's, but still plentiful enough. Calvin was a good son. He studied at the right schools. He married the right woman. He loved his family, his parents, his wife, and children. In every way, he strove to become a model prisoner. Every way, that is, except for one. Our father, Calvin Bernard Chambers III, was a rock and roll legend. Cal Chambers, Cece to his friends. You know his work. In his early years, he studied at the conservatory, making a name for himself as a prodigy. Of course, he had family money behind him. Unlike most of his contemporaries, he suffered no financial risk in plunging headfirst into his passion. Singer, musician, songwriter, Dad did it all. I loved watching him rock on stage. I stared at the TV, fascinated by the audience, those devoted faces alive with adoration. I understood on some deep level that he was more than just my dad. He belonged to the world, and the world belonged to him. We never knew why he chose to end his life. Years later, I noted a suspicious tone in something my mother said, something about the band's bass guitarist, Marlon Troke, Dad's closest childhood friend. Something to the effect that Dad had left behind 2 widows. But we never knew his reasons, not really. That last morning, when my sisters and I scrambled to the studio to tell Dad that Maggie, our cook, was putting breakfast on the table, well, let's just say it was a defining moment for each of us. Until then, we'd been merely sisters, running wild throughout the corridors of our LA mansion, 3 mermaids swimming comfortably in an ocean of privilege. From that moment on, we were 3 individuals. Our reactions to his death defined us in ways we previously could not have imagined. Tara, the eldest, was changed in an instant. She became serious to the point of solemnity, helping Mom survive all the myriad death-related tasks that are heaped so cruelly upon the heads of the newly widowed. Clara, the baby of the family, ran screaming from the studio that morning. In the chaos that followed, no one thought to look for her. It was dinner time before Maggie tracked her down, hiding inside a trunk of cast-off clothes we used for dress-up games. Clara wouldn't speak for over a week, and when she did, it was as if Dad's suicide had never happened. No reference to the man, not to his life, nor to his death, escaped her lips for months. When she finally spoke his name, the inference was that he was away on tour and would be home any day now. In her flighty way, Clara probably suffered more deeply than any of us. She bottled up her grief, and during her teen years she became highly promiscuous, ignoring her studies and relying more than once on our money to shield her from the consequences of her behavior. Mom cried herself to sleep the night Dad died, and probably for many nights to come, although I can't say for sure. As for me, I remember with sickening clarity staring up at his lifeless body. It hung from a cable strung over an oak beam, not far from his beloved baby Grand. His guitar rested on its stand, not more than a few feet away. I recall the pungent odor, the foul emissions of a dying body. I studied his grotesque death mask, looking for some semblance of the only man I'd ever loved. A gentle, talented father and musician. I found nothing in that mask to which I could relate. In that moment, my lifelong obsession was born. I turned to music as my one true solace. Every night, I lay in bed, headphones on, playing every song my father had loved. At first, I couldn't bring myself to play his music. That would have been too much to bear. But there were so many other gems we'd enjoyed together. Opera songs, rock, jazz, blues. After his death, I would listen, often singing along in my head until I fell asleep to my favorite, Time to Say Goodbye, the Andrea Bocelli and Sarah Brightman version. Within weeks of Dad's passing, I had abandoned any pretense of connections to the outside world. I no longer paid attention to conversations, to schoolwork, to my mother or sisters. Every waking moment was filled with the music in my head, the lyrics, the melodies that rolled constantly through the hills and valleys of my developing synapses. Did the music bring me serenity, peace, joy? Maybe. I was too young to understand the autism taking root in my personality. All I knew was that music, with its steady thrum, the rise and fall, the poetry of the lyrics, covered me in a merciful blanket of solace. I sold my first pop song at the age of 11. By the time I was 13, my music was featured in a number of lesser-known films. I scored my first hit movie at 15. No doubt my father's name gave me more than a leg up in our industry. Predictably, our wealth protected me from the ravages of my disorder, the Asperger's syndrome of which I was only peripherally aware. My family kept the secret of my illness away from the outside world. Drop out of school? No problem. My mother explained it away. Our Farah is homeschooled. Her future in music makes it hard for her to attend traditional classes. Refuse to make eye contact or to answer when spoken to in public? Farah's like that, my sisters would giggle. Always has her head in the music. Earth to Farah. And they were right. I wasn't being deliberately rude. I had simply become, over the months following Dad's death, unable to engage, focused exclusively on the music that filled my head, my heart, my soul. My mother did her best to drag me out of my cocoon, lining up soirees and other small events where I could play my compositions for members of our wealthy class. Of course, these events were often attended by well-known artists and musicians, ensuring my talent would be publicized to the right people. I didn't mind. I was okay in those social situations, removed as I was from the main gathering. The audience didn't exist for me, not really. My vocal range was passable enough for such small groups. I sang my original pop pieces, although I was under no illusions of talent in that arena. Dad's voice had been pitch perfect. Mine, well, it was pleasing in the right setting. That is all. And so the years passed. My mother aged. She never remarried. She insisted Dad had been her one true love. Besides, she argued, she wasn't willing to risk a marriage that would diminish the inheritance intended for her children. Prisons. No one escapes. Not really. She seemed happy, though I'm the first to admit I'm no judge of the happiness of others. She was always good to me. That's all I really know. My sisters recognized my illness long before I could give it a name. They covered for me publicly and found ways to include me in social events, despite my craving for solitude. They could well have lost patience with me. I complained endlessly. I made myself generally unpleasant whenever I was forced out of the music room. It was now my music room, and into the company of others. They could have given up on me, but they insisted I join them in the greater world at every opportunity. When my disorder made a public appearance, causing me to act out rudely to others, they surrounded me, speaking for me when necessary, and shielding me from the brunt of dreaded human contact. And so it happened that I found myself flanked by my two beautiful sisters at the wedding of a cousin. You know her. She's big in accessories. We were all gathered at a huge church. The bride was another lovely Chambers redhead, a smidge taller than me, though not as tall as my sister Tara. Clara and her husband, the drummer Eddie Keats, were there. Our eldest sister Tara had never married. She'd enjoyed the usual number of relationships, but ruled each out on the grounds that her suitors were smitten by the Chambers Trust Fund rather than by our sea green eyes. My mother, two sisters, and I occupied one pew in the grand church. I'd never mastered the skills of society, how to dress, smile, speak. Mom and my sisters took care of me. Tara had chosen my silk dress, a clinging number in strokes of burnt amber that made me think of a Pacific sunset. Mom had surprised me with a delicate silk hat. Normally, I'm no fan of fashion. I won't pretend false modesty. The women in our family are good-looking, with our stature, our flaming red hair, almond-shaped green eyes, and natural curves. Physical appearance was not something I ever thought much about. But that morning, standing in front of the gilded mirror, as Mum placed the tasteful deep burgundy hat atop my head, I couldn't help but think, damn, I look pretty good. Stunning, Tara said, hugging me from behind. Gorgeous, Mum agreed. When we hooked up with Clara and Eddie, they let out whistles of appreciation. At 29, I'd never dated. It had never been an option for me, really. To date, you have to notice other people. You have to be aware of them and of yourself and of your own behavior. The lack of romance never bothered me. I had my mom, my sisters, my memories of Dad, and above all, I had music. It was what I lived for. Tara and Clara were both charming, funny, engaging, and at the same time, they knew how to keep me safely wedged between them, to protect me from being touched by strangers. I hate being touched, especially by strangers. I don't shake hands. I don't hug. I don't make eye contact. For me, it's the most intimate connection between two human beings. It's a spiritual union, however brief, between people. It's not a union in which I care to engage. Hell, I don't usually even answer when people say hello. In gatherings such as this, I stay inside my own head until I feel the familiar nudge from one of my sisters. That's my cue to nod, to smile, to pretend I know or give a damn about what some aging relative just said to me. Henry. We met him that morning at my cousin's wedding. His eyes were blue. His hair was angel blonde. He was tall, close in height to our late father, although that was where the similarities ended. Dad had been a warm man in his own way, gracious and generous to the world, to his friends and fans, and certainly to his wife and daughters. Handsome as all get out with his laughing green eyes and shock of red hair. But he'd never been charming, not in the way Henry was. The moment Henry was introduced to us outside of the church, he clasped Tara's hand and said something so funny she almost snorted in laughter. I didn't catch what he'd said, but I sure noticed Tara's reaction. You might say I woke in that moment from a long, deep sleep. The endless dream my life had fallen into, my supreme fugue state, was over. Clara giggled at Henry's joke, and Eddie guffawed as they each shook his hand in turn. Mom nodded and smiled. I could see she was taken with our new friend. And then he looked at me. His blue eyes met mine directly. All of the surrounding noise fell away, and I was suddenly aware of him, the way I hadn't been aware of another human being in a long, long time. There were tiny crinkles at the corners of his eyes, the kind that spring from a well of laughter. His hands, when he held mine, were pleasantly warm. He stepped back, still holding my fingers, and oh, the charge of electricity that raced from those digits into my very soul, to admire the silk sunset dress I'd forgotten I was wearing. I felt my cheeks burn, knowing that he found me utterly attractive. Henry Olds, he repeated, as if he knew I hadn't been listening, but was willing to make allowances for my previous inattention. It's lovely to meet you at last. I'm a huge fan of your music. This took me by surprise. Most people outside the industry wouldn't know my work. The singers, the artists, the performers, they are the stars, the ones who bring my art to life. They are the names and the faces, the famous ones adored by fans. Me, I'm merely a conduit. That's what Mom once said, and it's true. Mom didn't know I'd been listening when she said it to Maggie one morning. I so rarely listen to anyone or engaged in conversation that people forget I'm there. She's a savant, Mom said, carrying the breakfast dishes to the sink. The music just comes out of her, complete and ready to go. It's as if she's a robot of some kind, a conduit for the music, really. One day, Maggie said, she may want more from life than just the music. I know, Mom said, and God help her when that day comes. God help us all, Maggie agreed. Farrah Chambers, I stammered, unable to break free from Henry's gaze. The moment was becoming weird. We'd held each other's hands and gazes too long. I felt my sister squirm and pulled away, looking at my feet, suddenly aware of the designer stilettos Clara had purchased to match my dress. So nice to meet you, Mr. Rolls, Mom said, reaching for Henry's hand. Her tone was friendly, in a chirpy, socially graced way, but I could tell it was also dismissive. She was ready for Henry to move on. Hope to see you at the reception, he said. He waved at all of us before making his way to the long line of limousines, but I sensed that both his wave and his comments were directed at me. He found his car and opened the passenger door, but before he slid into the back seat, he looked our way. His eyes met mine once more, and my body burst into flames. I'm afraid you're moving too fast, Mom said. Maggie plopped a pancake onto my plate. Her silence was no cover for her opinion. I could tell she agreed with Mom. Maggie had always been my protector, a gargoyle of sorts. Farrah, there's just something about Henry, Tara said. I don't know what it is. Please think this through. I felt the hot sting of tears burning my eyes. It was an unfamiliar sensation. I had not wept, not even come close to crying, since the day my father died. Any time sorrow threatened to rear its dark head, there was always the music, the relentless rhythm, the irresistible melody. I was safe behind that wall of sound. And now, without warning, my music was no longer enough. In fact, I'd hardly worked on my current soundtrack, had barely even listened to it, since Henry had danced into my life. "Don't you want me to be happy?" I whispered. "Of course, honey," Tara said, "but Henry is the first man to show an interest. You have no experience in romance. You should be dating, getting to know each other." Tara looked past me at my mother, who nodded. "Besides," my sister added, "he may not understand about the music." She meant to say that Henry might not get it about my autism, about my obsession, my inability to see or hear anything or anyone beyond the melodies that dominated my mind. "He understands," I argued. "He gets it. He accepts me as I am. Who else would ever accept me?" "You're a young, beautiful woman," Mom said. "You have your father's looks and his talent. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life." "And yet," I said, spitting out the words, "Henry is the first. He's the first to notice me, to look at me, to realize there's a human being in here. All these years, not even one date, not even a single hint of romance in my life. Henry is my first and probably my last chance for happiness." In the end, it would be my decision. They could shield and protect me only so far. I was, after all, a grown woman. Later that week, I received a call from Clara. My younger sister had never been one to mince words. "I don't like him," she said. "He's too much. He's unbelievable. And Farah, to be honest, you've never been a good judge of character. You don't see things that other people see. You're distracted." Yes, distracted. Good word for my illness. She had a point. Until the day I met Henry, there had only been the music. But thanks to him, my long interlude was over. I was awake, clear-eyed in a way I'd never been. They all thought I was blind, that I couldn't see Henry in a realistic light. But they were wrong. I could see him perfectly in all his splendid appeal. I could see him to the exclusion of everything and everyone else. I had committed his laughter, his countenance, his every turn of phrase to memory. He was my magnum opus. Besides, Clara was in no position to judge me. She'd married that headbanger Eddie, for Pete's sake, a drummer who'd once trashed a hotel room so thoroughly that his entire band was barred from entering any Hilton facility for life. Eddie was a goon, true to the drummer stereotype. Still, he did seem devoted to Clara. And why not? Despite her troubled teenage years, my baby sister had grown into a fine lady, beautiful and down to earth. She'd make a good mother one day. Mother! Good God! Did I dare consider the possibility of my own motherhood? No. Push that thought aside. I was awake, but I was not miraculously cleared, not ready by a long shot to toss aside all my emotional crutches and claim sweet freedom. I had many miles to go before I could entertain the idea of motherhood. Thank God Henry understood. He was in no rush to have children. Our wedding was small by Chambers family standards. My mother planned the service and reception. I'm not capable of things like that. My sisters decorated the church in dangling silver treble clefs instead of wedding bells. I thought they did a beautiful job. My dad's childhood friend and former bass player, Marlon Troke, walked me down the aisle. Whatever suspicions Mom might have harbored against Marlon, he'd remained a close friend of the family, helping Mom whenever he was able. My dress was lovely. The guests were lovely. The church was lovely. It was all lovely. I'm sure it was. But to tell you the truth, I had eyes only for Henry. He stood there near the minister, flanked by groomsmen on his right, who were close cousins of mine, and bridesmaids on his left, my sisters and cousins. Henry had no close family of his own. I floated toward him, mindful of my 6-inch silver-plated heels. The shoes were a nightmare, sterling silver mesh uppers that wrapped around my Parisian ivory lace stockings, heels any red-blooded fashionista would die for. Heels that I, if I wasn't careful, might die on. The minister blathered on. The rings were exchanged. The organ played. None of it penetrated my consciousness. I was fixated on those playful blue eyes, watching me with their sparkle of humor, affection, and a hint of lust. I blushed all the way from my silver-clad toes to the roots of my red hair. My mom had asked repeatedly why we'd rushed this wedding. I was surprised she couldn't guess the reason. It was no mystery. I was a virgin, for Pete's sake. Since I'd maintained an involuntary virginal state for 29 years, Henry and I agreed we might as well wait until our wedding night before exploring our lust. After all, I'd come this far. He made no secret of his own sexual experience, and once or twice he pressed me to go further, but in the end he respected my wishes. He assured me that so long as it was not a long engagement, he would wait. I had no intention of allowing the engagement to drag on. Finally, the ceremony was over. Tara and Clara stayed close to me as the after-wedding throng gathered on the church grounds. Somehow we all survived the chaos of photos and greetings and hugs and kisses. When you are blessed with social standing, Mom reminded me, you also have certain obligations. So, while the wedding itself was not large, the reception afterward was a real barn burner. So many social debts to be repaid. Marlon had arranged for his band to perform, complete with a hot new singer to fill Dad's lead role. They performed one of Dad's early pieces, a poignant love song, which was perfect for the first dance. Like me, Dad had a soft spot for D minor. A fair portion of his work fell into that key. Yours Until Sunset, one of his earliest hits, flowed through my veins. It haunted me, but in a beautiful way. When my new husband danced me onto the floor to that sweet music, I felt as if Dad was smiling down, congratulating me for breaking free at last from my personal prison. He rained his ghostly blessings onto my head, as only a father can. I was exhausted. Anyone would be after a day like that, but it really took a toll on someone with my emotional issues. Still, tired as I was, I could not take my eyes off my husband. He was my new obsession. I could not believe he was mine. My eyes searched the darkened dance hall and located Henry, speaking to one of my relatives, Aunt Phyllis, my father's oldest sister. He leaned in, said something to her, and she instantly lit up, breaking into genuine laughter. Then he glanced my way, nudged Aunt Phyllis, and pointed at me. My dear Henry, such love burning in those eyes, such husbandly pride. Suddenly, I was overrun by a gaggle of cousins. I surprised myself by engaging in conversation. Marriage to the most handsome man in the world filled me with confidence. I joked with my relatives. They laughed, and I thanked them for coming. You know, spoke to them the way a normal person would, and they spoke to me. Who would have thought it possible? Not me. The reception had been fun and long. The band was packing up. It was almost time to leave. I'd lost sight of Henry about 20 minutes earlier. Fatigue was getting the better of me. Go to your room, Tara said. Ordered, actually. Henry and I had booked a room in the hotel. We'd be leaving for Barcelona in the morning. I'll tell Henry where you are, she assured me. Okay, I agreed. I just need the ladies' room before I go up. Tara laughed. Good luck using the bathroom in that dress. Actually, it's not so bad, I said. But these shoes. I lifted the dress and poked a silver toe out onto the carpet. Well, I'm going to take Mom home, Tara said. I'll be surprised if she doesn't pass out in the car. Good night, Tara, I said, kissing my sister on the cheek. Thank you for everything. really, for everything. Her eyes were wet with tears at my rare display of love. I'd do anything for you, Farah, she said. I hope you know that. We love you, sis. I knew she loved me. I suppose I'd spent my life soaking in their unconditional love, taking it for granted. But those days were over. Henry had opened my heart, taught me the importance of returning love for love. I love you too, Tara. Please give Mom a good night kiss for me. With that, she was gone. The hall was thinning out. A few hangers-on watched drunkenly as the band helped roadies move their equipment. Marlon, I said, thank you. That was a super performance. Truly wonderful. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, dear. Remember, you will always be my family. If you and Henry need anything, just say the word. Henry, where was my dear husband? It was getting late. Even the roadies looked like it was past their bedtime. Have you seen Henry? I asked. Marlon pointed to a side exit, a small door near the stage. I wasn't sure what was beyond, but I assumed the caterers had used that door. Good night, Marlon, I said. I'll call you and Brian when we get back from Barcelona. I leaned in to give him a kiss, something I'd never done before, despite having known him all my life. I was going for broke, becoming a new woman, reaching out to show people how much they meant to me. All thanks to Henry. Marlon held my hands for a moment, planting a kiss on my forehead, the way my father used to when he tucked me in. Good night, dear, he said. On the way to the side door, I removed my shoes. I could not take 5 more steps in those brutal heels. I set them on the stage along with my lace wrap and the tiny silver clutch that held my cell phone and a tube of lipstick. Floating on stocking feet was a great relief after so many hours of trying to stay erect on those gorgeous medieval torture devices. And so I floated, my wedding dress fluttering silently, my red hair swept up and bound at the top of my head. In my mind, I heard my father's song, Yours Until Sunset, and my heart danced as I went in search of my one true love. They didn't hear me pass through the swinging door. The caterers had long since gone home for the night, their leftovers packaged and shared among the staff, their dishes washed and neatly stacked into the cupboards. The young woman looked familiar. I'd seen her at the church, although I hadn't paid her much attention. I'd thought her dress was lovely, although she wore it awkwardly, like a woman unaccustomed to fine garments. She was a pretty girl, not tall, but not so short as to appear insignificant. Henry's face was in the shadow, turned away from me. Do it soon, the woman said. Patience, Janice. Patience my ass. There's no point, he said, until we can deal with her mother. So, deal with her mother. I will, as soon as we get back from Barcelona. Doesn't it make more sense, Janice said, for Mama to pass on while you're overseas? You know, gifted with an unquestionable alibi? Henry angled his face into the light and looked directly into Janice's eyes. The love I saw there took my breath away. I almost fainted on the spot from the sheer shock of it. Finally, he said, clearly, you have an idea. I do, she said. Leave it to me. I can handle the mother. A day or two before you're due to come home, she'll have a nasty fall. You'll receive a call. Are you sure? Henry asked. Have you thought it through? It has to be perfect. Don't worry your pretty head about that. Her laughter was sweet, not the sort you'd expect from a villain. I've worked out every detail, she said, right down to the moment you receive the call. All you have to do is act surprised. Can you do that? Yes, I can act. Indeed, she agreed, that you can. Actually, the best scenario would be to get rid of the sisters, too. That's nuts, Henry said. Greed is always a mistake. Besides, Farah's inheritance is more than enough. Never forget, my love, she said, that greed is the cornerstone of our relationship. They both laughed. But, she added, I agree. It would be stupid and unnecessary to screw with the sisters. Having said that, don't waste any time on Farah. I want her gone as soon as you get back. I am not into sharing my man. Oh, for God's sake, don't tell me you're jealous of Farah. Jealous of a mental spaz? I don't think so. Just the same, hear me loud and clear. That bitch dies a virgin. Got it? Got it, he said. She won't be able to live without her mother. I promise you, within a week, Farah will hang herself, just like her father did. No one will be surprised. Janice took his face into both of hers and kissed him deeply, passionately. She was clearly not a virgin. For a second, I was unable to move. The cold, sharp hook of reality jabbed me in the chest. I understood what I had just witnessed. Henry and his lover were planning murder. My mother's murder. My murder. I slipped quietly through the swinging door, just as I heard Henry murmur, "Not now. I have to go. She'll be looking for me." I grabbed my shoes, my purse, and wrap from the stage, and I ran toward the main exit, made my way to the ladies' room down the hall, hid in a stall till I managed to get my heart rate under control. People outside the music industry have no idea what it takes to create a masterful composition. They think you can just sit at a piano or some other instrument, and the music will flow effortlessly from your mind through to your fingertips, and all you need to do is record it. Not so. Even for someone like me, an emotional cripple, a musical savant, a mental spaz, an autistic genius, as some have said, the art of creating beautiful, accessible music is never easy. We may make it look easy, I'll grant you that, but it takes many years of internal struggle and turmoil to forge something unique out of a few errant electrical impulses flying around in the brain. It takes plotting, planning, discipline of the highest order. It takes focus. These are skills my father and I both possessed in abundance. Henry would be the first to pass on. I wasn't sure yet how he would die, but by the second day of our honeymoon, he would meet an untimely fate, most likely a poison-induced heart attack. The doctors in Barcelona would be baffled. I would be heartbroken. My money would take care of any inconvenient details. Making sure Mom was safe would be more difficult. I'd have to conjure up a plan to protect her until I could return home. Marlon would help. He thought of me as a daughter. He'd loved Dad, and he would do anything I asked of him. I reached into the tiny silver purse for my phone. He picked up on the second ring. "Marlon," I said, "are you home already?" "No, Brian and I are in a cab." "Head over to the house," I said. "I have a bad feeling about Mom. She's looked after me for so long. I'm worried about her there, all alone in that big house. There was something she said. I have a feeling she might hurt herself. Please, Marlon, please, don't leave her alone, even for a second till I get home." "Is Tara with her?" "No, she's just planning to drop her off. Please don't tell Tara unless you have to. I may be imagining it, but I cannot live with myself if I fly off and something happens to Mom. I can't go through that again." "What if she argues? Your mother doesn't like a lot of fuss," he said. "You can blame me. Just tell her I went into one of my fits. I made you swear you wouldn't take your eyes off her." "Don't worry, hon. We're turning the car around now. Brian and I will spend the week with your mom." "Thank you, Marlon. And remember, stay with her every minute. Don't take no for an answer." Killing Janice would be a challenge. I didn't even know her last name. I'd have to do some research, and not the kind you could trace on a browsing history. Patience was the key. I knew nothing about Janice or her connection to Henry. For all I knew, he might have grown up next door to her. She couldn't die immediately. There could be no connection between her death and Henry's. I'd need time to plan a suitable end to her existence. Let her wallow in her grief. Let her wonder what really became of her lover. Then, when sufficient time had passed, move in for the kill. Nothing fancy, simple and elegant. A fall in front of a train would fit the bill. No weapons and no witnesses. Nothing that could connect me to that evil bitch. It's been a year since I lost Henry to a heart attack in Barcelona. He went for a morning swim, leaving me to breakfast in the hotel dining room, and died alone in a chlorine sea. In the depths of my silent rage, I never realized how much I would miss him. I missed the way he looked at me, as if he really saw me. Like I was a human being, and not just some emotionally challenged freak, some trained chimpanzee on a string, churning out music for money. Oh yes, the music returned to me, with a vengeance. With Henry's passing, it slid back into my consciousness, reclaiming its crown as my one true obsession. I've been on a roll, in fact, unleashing new hits like a demented Babe Ruth, and the money is pouring in again. Not that we need it. We still have more old money than I can count, but it's nice to earn my keep again. I pull the white silk duvet up to my chin. I've slept in this very room for as long as I can remember. Mom peeks in, blows me a kiss. I smile and wish her good night. The headphones are soon in place, and Andrea Bocelli is once more paired with Sarah Brightman. I allow myself to drift away on an ocean of perfect harmony. Time to say goodbye. My very own Solace in D minor. I whisper, "Good night, Dad," at the ceiling, thinking how some prisons are indeed comfortable. I'll rest for a couple of hours, then I'll sneak out the back way. Earlier, I disconnected the security cameras, so I won't be seen leaving this fortress we call home. Enough time has passed. I've been patient, careful. Tonight I have a date with Janice. I know what time she catches the train to Pasadena. Greed and malice, I will vanquish thee. Then I'll grab a cab back to Beverly Hills, pay in cash, and walk the short remaining distance to my own home. Money can be a fortress or a prison, but music, well, music is always my comfort. I'll return to my soft, warm bed, set my headphones over my ears, and let the melody lift me into the sweet release of my dreams. It was never for the money, our music. My father and I had plenty of money. It was for the dark comfort, the relentless rhythm, the undeniable solace of a haunting melody. The end. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to that story as much as I enjoyed writing it and bringing it to you. Music is such a joy in our family, and with our children all having had some hand in music, especially our middle child, Ted, who is an exceptional musician. And I want to thank him, as I always do, for our theme song, Eyes of Gold. And thanks to each of you for coming and joining us at Story Stalking. I so enjoy bringing you these episodes from In the Key of 13 by the Mesdames of Mayhem, Carrick Publishing 2019. And I really hope to see you next week.
Dusty road, man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides, let it rock.